Hey, David T.S. Wood here, and welcome to My Extra Mile. Our comment winner is sincerely Bianca. She was commenting on the show, Struggle is Optional with Abby O'Neill. And she said this, this is so good. She said, thank you, David and Abby. She said, so much value here. Another comment winner on the same show said, this is the best show he's ever heard. So check it out with Abby O'Neill. My show today is amazing. This lady, all the way from London, England, we talked, and she runs the Happiness Museum. And really this whole philosophy of happiness and understanding that it's a practice. And she's working with children and going into areas where children are really in low places, and through simple practices, reprogramming their brains so they can be happier. So much value here. There's so much to listen to. Don't forget, ding, and also get the like button so you receive the shows once they come out. We'll definitely see you on the other side, and enjoy the incredible Victoria Johnson. So, it's so funny because I just asked you the question, what do you prefer, Vicky or Victoria? And when you say Victoria, for some reason, say it, go on, say Victoria.
Victoria.
There's something like rich and deep about it. Not that there isn't with Vicky. So somehow I think that Victoria has a resonance with you, but you say, I don't mind what people call me. But do the people that love you the most, is it Victoria?
It is. It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, well, I'm going to call you Victoria.
That's fine by me.
Listen, let's get into this. Like, I know that there's so much to explore with you. I mean, you're passionate about the world and travel and people and happiness the same way that I am. So I feel like we're kindred spirits. This is our first time meeting. And I said to you, let's not even talk too much. Let's get to know each other, now. And so I love the fact we're actually recording this, and it's as honest and as authentic and as real as we can get. If you knew what I was doing 3 minutes ago, I'm running to get here, right? But the Museum of Happiness, let's just start there, because I just like the ring of it, the Museum of Happiness. Tell us what that is.
So we're a not-for-profit social enterprise where we share the science and art of sustainable happiness in playful and reflective ways. So we're ultimately a community organisation, teaching, training, and we do that in schools. We help educate children around a kind of emotional well-being and happiness. So it'd be really great if we'd learnt all that stuff at school, right? Instead of being left as adults to just kind of trial and error, figure it out. And we work with the homeless people, we work with the NHS, we do it in corporations, we do it everywhere really. And it's just about, we're in a global kind of mental health crisis. And our ethos is, if we can teach people these tools, so it's more preventative instead of reactive, hopefully we can alleviate lots of suffering with the world.
Yeah, I had a really interesting experience, Victoria. I like saying it, Victoria. But was it 2 years ago? I did a training in Vanuatu. Do you know what Vanuatu is? It's in the South Pacific. Mm-hmm. It's an island, and it's an archipelago. So there's a number of islands, and I've traveled in probably 110 countries, maybe somewhere around there. So I've probably seen a lot of the world. I mean, in comparison to some people, I travel a lot. Yeah. But probably easily the happiest people I've ever met consistently, wherever I went. And it was interesting what I discovered, because, and I'll give you an example. This is a great story for you to sort of get the idea of what Vanuatu was. So I was there to do a leadership training. I had 72 different people flying in from different parts of Australia and New Zealand. And so they put me up in this beautiful hotel. And I went to the front desk, and as part of the program, it was a 7-day program, I wanted to do a contribution piece, which I always want to weave into my programs, is how do we give back to the community we're in? And I was looking for a school, and so we were going to do a complete makeover of a school, and I hadn't even found one, but so I go to the front desk, and I said to the person, excuse me, I'm looking for a school to help. Is there any chance you know of any teachers or any schools that could really do with some help? And she said, hold on. So she gets on the phone, And then she phones someone else. And then she phones someone else. And she says, all right, I found a school for you. It's a new school. They only have 18 students, but they're really struggling financially. I said, great. How do I get there? She says, easy. Go out the gate, turn left, and walk for 2.5 hours, and you'll find it on your right.
Easy, no problem.
Right. So anyway, I know that was a long story, but what I found out there, Vicky, there was this deep sense of happiness. And when I kept asking people, why is everyone so genuinely happy? And you could feel it. And poverty, they had what you and I may consider poverty. I don't think you and I would, but it looked poverty compared with the Western world. And what they talked about was they didn't need money. It was interesting that, you know, all the food grew on the trees. They had all the fish that came from the ocean, and no one was left outside because the communities would build a little shack for someone if they needed somewhere to live. So those basic needs were all met. And there was this genuine sense of contribution. And I just wanted to sort of start off there to say is, when you go to a place that is extremely happy, what's been your experience? What are the factors that or where have you been that surprised you how consistently happy people were?
I had really, really similar experiences. So after university, I went and volunteered at an orphanage in Cambodia. And I was there a few months, and there was 52 orphans aged from kind of 5 to 18. They were the happiest children I've ever met to this day. And it's really interesting because obviously, you know, they'd been through severe trauma, they'd lost their parents, they were carrying all this sorrow, yet they were the happiest children I've ever met. And the common factors and themes tend to be a sense of togetherness and community. You know, they may have lost their parents, but they had 52 brothers and sisters. They got up every day and they did meditation, they did yoga, they played outside. Everything, their basic needs were met, but there was a lot of love, there was a sense of community. And, you know, positive psychology says, you know, relationships really matter. Community really matters. And that actually inspired me to go and work at the largest youth and community organisation in the UK when I got back from travelling. And I was really struck by the really, really severe mental health challenges across the board within young people. So I was working with a lot of young people that were suicidal. I noticed that my mental health suffered because I was trying to carry and hold and support these young people that were really suffering. And it just really planted these seeds and these questions of how is it that people have lost their parents, but yet they're so happy. These children are happy and joyful and grateful, so grateful. And the young people here, they have so much more, yet they were so struggling. It's really, really interesting.
It's interesting because, again, as you started talking and sharing your story, again, I have so many because I've traveled so much in so many remote parts of the world, but I was in Kenya and I was leading a team up Kilimanjaro. And as part of that process, again, I'm always looking for ways to contribute. We bumped into a school, a little school, and I kind of walked by it and I was intrigued. So I went in and I found out there was a woman. The reason she started the school was because she had 2 daughters, and she understood that if she could educate her daughters, that they stood a chance in this poverty-stricken part of Africa. And so she took in all these other orphans. And so it was a school that was full of orphans. Now, when I went in the classroom, they had one desk, and this is a mud floor type of scenario. And they had, in the bedrooms, they didn't have beds. They had beds. They had, I think there was, if I remember, there was about 18 children, but there was only beds for 4 of them. So they kind of shared. It was the kind of the way it was. So we offered to sort of help out and help them. But what was interesting was one of the girls' names was Happiness. And when you started talking, I could see her vividly in my mind and what the kids had done. And you talk about happy children, like you said. I mean, one kid, both his parents, and a lot of them, their parents had died of AIDS. So that's for the reason a lot of them were orphans. One kid was found walking. He was a Maasai from the Maasai tribe. And he was just walking. And he was like 80 miles away from any other human being. And they just found this kid, and his parents had died, and he just wandered off. And he was out there in the wilderness. But this girl, Happiness, and what they did is they painted their hands, and over the walls of this kind of school, they had their handprints and their names. And there's this beautiful handprint with the word happiness under it.
Wow.
And as I stood there, and I had a couple of people with me that had never experienced it, you know, we were overcome with the joy. And then we had dinner. They had the same meal 3 times a day, which was just maize. It looked like slop, honestly. And you'd see them just laughing and excited and passionate. And that's what you felt in
in Cambodia.
Cambodia, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hard to describe though, right?
Oh my goodness. It moves something in you that's indescribable. It's hard to put it into words, isn't it? When you see people that are just so grateful to us and the Western world, it looks like they don't have a lot. Yeah, actually, I think they're rich. They're really wealthy in other ways, right?
Yeah.
That the Western world aren't.
Well, you said something which is intriguing me to sort of dig into, and I'm so enjoying this. I so enjoy you, by the way. I know we're going to become friends. I can feel it already. So I'm going to put out my little friendship flag. So if you want to take me up on it, that it's right here, right
Accepted.
now. Okay, good. You know, you talked about the connection part, and that's what I could look at in all these situations, and I can think of so many in my mind because I'm always looking for ways to contribute. So whenever I'm in these third worlds, I always find these pockets. But there's always this rich connection. The kids, you know, the older kids kind of just assumed a mother or a father role of the younger kids. It wasn't asked of them. They just did it,
Yeah.
you know, and there was this real
Yeah.
feeling of a bond between all of them. You didn't feel fighting or the competition that maybe we sense in our schools. But so when you see this, when you came back and you started noticing the mental health issues, was that the root, do you think? Was the root the disconnection? Or what do you find the root was in our society where we're seeing these challenges or problems, right?
I think in Southeast Asia, and especially in Cambodia, there was a rich sense of the values and the culture. You know, it was around kind of being really grateful, doing meditation, doing yoga. Buddhism was, you know, really, really strong in that part of the world. And people had a trust and faith. They had a spiritual connection. And yeah, they were connected to one another, but they were connected to something higher. And I think what I found with the young people that I was working with here, unless they were connected to a religion, there was that spiritual disconnect. Most of the young people didn't do yoga or meditation until we started doing it with them, and we noticed a difference. So I actually, off the back of my own kind of struggling to support them, because I definitely got like empathy fatigue, you know, being around the sorrow and the sadness, I felt like I caught it. And so I was like, man, I need to do something to build my resilience so I can keep supporting them, because, you know, you can't give from an empty cup, right? So, you know, we started doing gratitude practices with them. We started doing meditation, yoga with them. We noticed a difference. We noticed that, you know, the things in people's lives were still the same, but people were able to appreciate it more, or kind of carry the heavy stuff a little bit better. And I could too. So yeah, it's powerful. It's really powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting though. It's interesting what you talk about is that connection to something greater, right? I suppose, I mean, when we think about purpose as well, right? But I love the idea that you were able to identify within yourself a need to be able to create the resilience through a deeper connection yourself, which I think a lot of people maybe don't feel that. You know, it's not a personal responsibility thing where you look at the world and you say, hey, I'm feeling this way. I think a lot of people get into the habit of, you know, if this changes out here, then happiness I can be happier if I get this job, if I get this, if I have this, if I have more money. Versus what you did is, if I can find a deeper connection within myself, then I'm going to be able to call on something that currently you're not connected to. Is that kind of what happened? Am I articulating this?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And I think one of my favorite messages from Thich Nhat Hanh is peace in oneself, peace in the world. And, you know, I've had the joy and pleasure of spending time with the Dalai Lama, and he's such an advocate of happiness. And he's like, you know, happiness doesn't come ready-made. It comes from your own actions and your own attitude. Like, you can't seek it in the outer world. It has to come from within you. And I was slipping, I was going down with them. And I was like, I need to do something within myself. So I started learning positive psychology. I learned about gratitude, trained as a mindfulness and meditation teacher and a mindful self-compassion teacher. And I think my own inner transformation, I don't know, there was something in me that was like, you can't help them if you can't help yourself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because when I met the Dalai Lama in America, in a little tiny town called Haley in Idaho. I mean, It's a tiny, tiny town. And the reason why he came there, Bruce Willis owns a home there. And this little tiny town in the middle of nowhere has become a beacon because of of his popularity and bringing in other people who are, you know, more conscious. So the Dalai Lama was invited there to do a talk. And imagine he walks into this little soccer field in this tiny little town, and he sits there, you know, you've seen him, you know, he's got his 2 aides, and it's a really hot day. He's got his umbrella, and he's sitting on this big red chair with this sort of, and I'm sitting as close to him, you know, I don't know, 7, 8, 10 feet away. And I'm watching him, and somebody from the audience, we were doing a Q&A, and someone from the audience asked this question. And it was such a deep, profound question, but it felt like the reason he asked it was to show how intelligent he was. That's what it felt like. And the Dalai Lama with those big glasses, he looks down, he looks up, he looks down, grabs his chin, and and everyone's kind of, the longer the silence is, more people are leaning in like, this is going to be good. This answer is going to be good. And suddenly he starts to slap his leg, and he starts to laugh. You know the laugh, that boyish, soulful, deep, you know, unapologetic laugh he has. And he started to laugh like a little kid. He looked at the guy and says, I have no idea. And that changed my life. Watching him in that moment changed how I approached the world. I thought, oh my God, for the first time I saw true authenticity. And for someone in that, you know, everyone's watching him to have the answer. I have no idea. And
I don't know.
And that's where I started to really seek out authenticity in my quest for total happiness. He's like becoming, and what role does that play? You know, when we look at the Dalai Lama and his connection to something greater, but also his transparency, is that play a role as well? Because so many people are hiding behind masks, right?
100%. Authenticity is so important. And, you know, I learned that the hard way. I'll be really honest. You know, you run a museum of happiness. And in the early days, I was like, God, I must be happy all the time because I run a museum of happiness. And there's that book, The Happiness Trap, and have you seen the front cover? And it's like this giant smiley face and this man's trying to carry it and his knees are wobbling. And I felt like that. I felt like I had to be joyful and smiling all the time. And it was exhausting because it was like, I'm human. You know, I'm not, you know, I am joyful and peaceful, and you know, I can connect. I can always show up with love, but sometimes you're a bit grumpy and you don't feel joyful because we're human, right? And yeah, I had to really be like, no one expects that of you all the time. You know, sometimes you're low energy. You might have a cold once a year, and that's okay. And I think the day that I realized you can just show up and be you, give yourself permission to be you. And, you know, when I'm teaching workshops, to be able to just use my own examples instead of having to kind of be very, very polished and be who I think people expect me to be. And people love it. People are like, oh, thank God she's human.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
well,
yeah.
I think what happens is relatability is such an important quality. And I found in my work, and I've trained so many people around the world, is people relate to the imperfection more than the perfection. And so the more imperfect, the more human we are, the deeper the connection I find, you know, between a student and a teacher. But then a great teacher I find, and probably you and I fall in that, hopefully we fall into that category, is we're both students as well. So as you're teaching, you're learning. It's never like, oh, you come there with the answer. You come there with questions and you have answers of your experience, but someone else's experience can lend to that, right?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. In every group I'm in, there's so much wisdom within the group. So it's like just absorbing the wisdom from the group. And I learn something new every day. Every time I teach something, we always have sharing circles at the end of our workshops, whether we're in Google, Facebook, the government, anywhere, the military. And I often think, is this the time where it's going to go down really badly? And people are going to be like, no, we're not doing a sharing circle. But people haven't yet. But yeah, and like the richness, the wisdom that comes from people just kind of taking that mask off and being like, hey, like this is life, and the sense of common humanity as well, of like people share, people are real, and you learn so much, right, from one another as humans.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, right? To learn as humans. But the sharing circles is interesting because at the end of every event I've ever done, I always want the student's voice to be the last one's heard. And it's incredible how much I learn and how much the other students learn from each other. And I use circles throughout. If I'm doing a 5-day event, they may have 15 or 20 different circles where voices are heard, because I think I feel it's so important. But go back to something. Let's talk about because we got people listening all over the world, to be honest. And what is the things, what is the struggle right now? I want to see if we can identify the person listening right now. What are some of the struggles you're seeing? And this is predominantly listened to by a Western mind. What are some of the struggles you're seeing? And then let's look at sort of some of the pathways that maybe be open to someone to discover and have more happiness, because like you say, I do find personally, I find a lot of people aren't genuinely happy.
Yeah.
I mean, when I say genuine happiness, when I go into Vanuatu and I walk up to anyone and I sit with them, I feel a sense of deep happiness, and I can't explain what that is. But when I'm talking to someone here, quite often I can't even get into a deep place with some people because their mind is so all over the place, right? But what are some of the things you're saying? What are some of the challenges that we're facing, and especially children? You mentioned children. I know a lot of your work is focused in the young mind, and I understand why, because I think there's possibly a deeper understanding is, you grow a happy child, you're going to grow a happy adult, and they're going to grow happy children. I mean, education is such an important thing, right? So what are some of the challenges we're facing right now?
I think people don't know how to hold space for their difficult thoughts and difficult emotions. So I think, we have a negativity bias in our brain. So people's minds naturally go to the negative and the critical. People are naturally negative unless they find different practices and ways in the Western world anyway, right? And until we find different ways to kind of take care of the mind and we do things that make us happy. And so I think that's been the biggest thing that we've noticed is people are just in turmoil with themselves. And we run a session called Making Friends with Your Mind, and it's the most popular session because everyone's like, God, I really want to make friends with my mind and I don't know how. And making friends with your difficult emotions, so I think that's been the biggest kind of running theme that I've seen over the years, whether it's adults or children, is people are not at peace with themselves. There is a lot of inner turbulence, suffering, pain, difficult thoughts, difficult emotions that they just don't know what to do with. And they think that they're the enemies. They think the difficult thoughts and the difficult emotions are the bad guys. And actually it's not. Like, our mind's trying to keep us safe. Our difficult emotions are just messengers. So I would say that's been the biggest theme. And I think not being able to really appreciate what we have, the gratitude element. So a lot of the children that we've worked with in the Western world, they have a lot more than what they do in Cambodia, for example, in the orphanage. But they don't know, they haven't been taught how to appreciate it. And there's always that, I guess, society in the Western world teaches us, almost sells us a false roadmap to happiness, right? When I have this thing, I'll be happy. When I have this, I'll be happy. And it's all based on material things a lot of the time. And then people get those things and they still don't feel happy. So then you're like, well, gosh, I've done all the things that society said I'd be happy if I did, and now I'm not happy. So there must be something really wrong with me.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. That sort of that process, I can hear everyone right now. They say, oh my God, how do we do that? How do we? So I know that we probably don't have time, and hopefully if there's more work we can do together, we'll do more shows together. But I wonder if you can give someone, that person that's saying, because I mean, one of the things I focus on in a lot of my work primarily is that conversation, that other voice. And I know how hard it was for me. I grew up in the East End of London. Again, I know that you're in the East End of London. And I grew up in a time where, it was pretty brutal then. I mean, Bethnal Green back then was it was a hard place by Western standards. But I just remember how many years it took me to really understand that my conditioned mind wasn't me, and how to discover my true self. And I still have that voice. I still have the negative stream. I just been able to turn the volume down. And there's certain situations where I'm in where I can hear the volume go up, but I've been able to identify that that isn't me. That's the conditioning, and that's repetition of thought. And then when I studied the brain more, and I understood about neural pathways, and I understand that our thoughts, our negative stream of thoughts, just create these super highways in the brain, and that we can create new highways. It's almost like, when we understand that we have the power to go in and reprogram what's there, which is what the practices you're talking about, which is the gratitude practices and the mindful practices. And that's all that's doing, is rewiring the brain. And so is that, if just to sort of throw that back to you, is that kind of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we share at the Museum of Happiness is ultimately practical tools and techniques that you can implement into day-to-day life, which will rewire the brain. So say if we go to a natural negativity bias, negative and critical, like kind of neural pathway, we can do gratitude practices. So just reflect on 3 things you're grateful for each day. If you are really, really struggling with difficult thoughts, can we go into...
Give us a common thought so people can identify it. So some people may skip over this, but give us some of those, because and I know probably there's a theme that you can see consistently. So what are those thoughts that most people are having that you're seeing all over, that people are saying, yeah, that's kind of me? What are those thoughts?
The biggest common theme is I'm not good enough.
Right.
And our mind will package it up in creative ways, but it's ultimately, it comes down to this: I'm not good enough, I'm not enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not attractive enough, my body's not good enough, this isn't enough, I'm not enough. And it's just not true. It's just not true. So I think just knowing that thoughts aren't facts blew my mind a few years ago. I was like, the negative and critical things I say to myself aren't facts. It's just this kind of inner dialogue. It's my inner critic. And the gratitude really helped. I think the biggest thing that really helped me and tends to help our community is the mindful self-compassion. So just being a little bit kinder and gentler with ourselves. And it's a couple of questions actually, just in a really practical way, that have really kind of helped our community and myself, is, just checking in with ourselves. What do I need right now to best take care of myself? Yeah. What's the kindest thing I could do for myself, even just a little? And knowing that resistance may come up because we're not used to being kind to ourselves. We're really good at giving ourselves a hard time. We're quite kind to other people, but often
I was going to say, if most of us, if we spoke to others the way we speak to ourselves, we wouldn't have any friends at all.
We'd have no friends.
Right? I was going to say this because you're a beautiful woman, you're intelligent. You think about, just to give someone who's watching right now, what are some of the things that you struggle with before you started doing the mindful practices? And I love the mindful compassion and mindful kindness, because kindness to me is the most important word on the planet. To me, if I could only be one thing, I'd be kind, because it just, once it becomes part of the DNA of a person, everything you do, because to be kind outwardly, you have to be kind inwardly. I can't be mean to myself and kind to someone who's being a dick, right? Yeah, I have to have supreme compassion for myself before I can see it for someone else, right? Yeah. So it is a practice. But what are some of the things you said to yourself that you caught yourself once you started doing the work that was like, oh, I can't believe I'm saying this to myself?
Oh my goodness, so much stuff. So one of my biggest ones was I'm not smart enough. And not
it's funny, I used intelligent as your descriptor. I said, you're beautiful and intelligent. It's like, yeah, okay. Yeah.
And it's like, it was really interesting. So I went through the whole education system with just believing I was stupid. And I think there's an Einstein quote that says, if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its whole life thinking it's stupid. So that was kind of my story and journey. It was
that's the first time I've heard most quotes. That's the very first time I've heard that quote, and I'm going to steal it. All right. So I'm going to own it. If you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, what was the end of it?
It will spend its whole life thinking it's stupid.
Okay, right. Oh my God.
Yeah,
that's so good.
Because that's not its strength. That's not its zone of genius. Swimming is. So it was weird. Like I wasn't academic, but I wasn't classed as arty, creative either. So I was like, well, what's my strength? And I just kind of went through life. I was always quite positive and I was always empathetic and kind, but they aren't traits that are rewarded or praised in school. It's kind of academia or creativity. And I didn't really feel kind of fit within that box in either of them. So I kind of was like, well, what's my strength? What am I good at? And then I kind of found my way through volunteering and different things and kind of going more into a therapeutic journey. And I think it's only been the last few years by doing a lot of mindfulness, mindful self-compassion, Marissa Peer's work of, that I am enough stuff, that I've been able to step up as a leader within the organization. I've been able to, run these sessions with, I did a talk yesterday with 700 people, and I just wouldn't have been able to do it because I wouldn't have believed I was able to or good enough if it wasn't for all these tools and techniques.
Well, what's interesting though is that here you are contributing for me, my observation is at a very, very high level. And you could see that by what you've attracted, you attract even, connection with the Dalai Lama. That happens because of the work. I mean, if you were out there, you're drawn into things and drawn into situations, whether it's Nepal or India, you're doing work in India, the work you did in Cambodia, all these things start to emerge. But I'm fascinated by the fact that you are at this level now and contributing, and now new doors and new possibilities are opening in your mind moment to moment. There's going to be ways, because your purpose now about creating more happiness in the world, I mean, it's a lifetime. That's a life, really, it's many lifetimes of work, right? So my point, did you freeze? I think you froze on me. I'm going to keep talking. Oh, you just froze there. My point with that is that, imagine if you hadn't discovered the work and you'd continued walking through life thinking that you were stupid or thinking you weren't smart enough. And what pathway would you have ended up on with that central theme in your mind that I'm not good enough, right? Yeah. So isn't it fascinating though? So we're talking about these practices. So if we go back to your moment of practice, starting out, because I'm thinking about the person who's watching right now, who's identifying with the pain. They realize that they're not really happy. Where would you want them to start? What's the practice we can give them right now that's going to say, if I incorporate this one small step into my daily practice, that over the next 90 days, because we understand that, well, we say 30, I like 90, some people say 32 days, but that reinforcement of a practice to rewire the brain, for me, if you spent 50 years beating the crap out of yourself, it ain't going to change in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the kind of quickest one that is the most simple, that doesn't cost any money, I would say gratitude. To wake up in the morning and just write down, if you can only think of one thing. So in science, it says if you can think of 3 good things in 24 hours, and sometimes you're like, nothing good has happened. But actually, if you really try hard, it's like, I woke up in a house, in a bed, there's food in my fridge, hopefully. You can often find 3 things, and if not, 1 is fine. So I think that was the simplest, quickest route in to kind of watering seeds of joy. And I think a self-compassion question that's just simple, of just, what do I need to best take care of myself today? We're so busy kind of looking after lots of other people's needs and projects, and we forget that we're an important project that needs time and attention and love and kindness. And I think there's so many myths, isn't there, that it's selfish, it's self-indulgent, but actually I know that I am a better colleague, I'm a more patient, friend, daughter, when I am, giving myself the things that I need.
Yeah, it's interesting, because that practice of gratitude, which is something, again, I incorporate into a lot of the work I do, is with more self-love. I think if you and I were playing gratitude table tennis and we had to keep going until one of us stopped, we could probably find thousands and thousands and thousands of things that we're grateful for. Because right now, I had one go through my mind as you were sharing that. My son came over and he's clearing the leaves outside, but he's using a blower to do it. And so it's making some noise in the microphone. And I'm thinking, I'm so grateful my son's out there. He's come over to my house, and he's clearing leaves. And now, what I'm saying is that I could be like, oh my God, there's noise, this is a recording, it's going out around the world. But I choose to rather say, I mean, what 20-year-old comes over to your house and cleans up the leaves for you, right? So that's kind of like, well, yeah.
Got a good son. Thank God for those gratitude neurons. They're like seeing the good in here instead of being like, not now.
Yeah. But I was going to say is that gratitude piece, it's interesting how often. So when I have a dinner party, right, and let's say my kids are there and their friends are there, and I invite some other adults, right, typically what happens is at the end of each meal, we do this practice. So, and this came from friends of mine. It's 2 things we were grateful for today, 1 thing we were good at today, 1 thing we're looking forward to, and 1 thing we love about ourselves, right? And we go around, and my kids have grown up with this, so they're fine, you know. But what's interesting is when I invite adults, that the adults always struggle. And especially, which one do you think they struggle with the most?
The thing that's good about yourself?
Yeah, 1 thing I love about myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, here we are, these adults, and you know, when the kids were littler, you know, and it's like, I want to, you say, you're an adult, can you not find one? And that's what it was like now. But I understand that in situations like that, how not to love ourselves is so learned. And you talked about it a moment ago, because you think growing up in England, like we both have, you know, you'd be called a big head if you turned around and said something funny about yourself.
You're so full of yourself.
Yeah, you big head.
So egotistical. Look at you. Who do you think you are?
Right? And it's like, so, I mean, where does it start? It's like, you know, we're being indoctrinated, and even by parents. You said something, when you said about feeling stupid, or not smart, you didn't say stupid, you said not smart. I mean, I can guarantee if I trace that origin of that thought, was probably one of your parents or your grandparents or your teacher at school. Somebody gave you that, probably quite young. Do you remember what age you were when it came?
Yeah, it was my English teacher.
I'm glad I said, or a teacher.
Yeah, it was my English teacher. And I think, you know, I don't learn through writing and reading. I learn through doing and trying things and like kinesthetic and creative, and you know, and that just wasn't what English was like. So, you know, I didn't learn that well. Like, you know, I would switch off because it was boring. It wasn't the way I retained information. And she really was just very, very negative, and she was the one that planted that seed of, you know, you're stupid, you're not clever. And I think the thing with teachers, which we do teacher trainings and we work with the students, and I think teachers need to be so mindful because they can put these like linguistic shackles on children that they live with their whole life, this flippant comment. And it's like, no, people grow into humans and have this belief, and it's so out of date. It's not even true anymore, but people don't know that.
Yeah, so, it's interesting because my history teacher, Richard Osler, I tell this story quite often, sat me down, I was 15, and this really changed the course of my life in many ways. But he said, you know, David, you're the worst student I've had in 37 years of teaching, and you're probably going to end up in jail or on the streets. And I was so pissed. I was only 15, but I ended up leaving school at 15. But I just remember feeling stupid and feeling like I couldn't learn anything, and feeling like, and for years, I mean, I carried that burden on my back. And I'm like you, I'm a kinesthetic learner. I can't, when I start to read, words just jumble up in my head, and I can't make sense of them. I may have been called something. You and I, maybe if we were growing up today, we'd probably be on medication. You know what I'm saying? Luckily, I didn't grow up then. But it's interesting that I had that core belief that I was stupid. And, you know, now I work with some of the most beautiful minds in the world, and it never goes through my head. It's just like, hey, I'm Dave. I don't have that distinction, but that comes back to the practice. So with your gratitude practice, let's go back to the practice. When you say people struggle, and what is, when you first started doing it, was there a constant theme? I mean, is there something like do you find that sometimes people kind of focus just outwardly? Does it matter where you focus on gratitude, or is it just the muscle? Is it just saying, hey, at least if I focus on gratitude, 3 things a day I've focused on? And what I actually practice, to be honest with you, is like, if I find my mind wandering down a darker road, that's when I use my gratitude practice right there. And they say, oh, I say, what am I thinking? What am I allowing myself to think? What am I grateful for right now? I'm grateful for my son making that noise, right?
Yeah, I use it the same. Like, it's a really good stress management tool of like, actually when you find yourself kind of slipping down a bit of a negative spiral, whether it's with difficult emotions or, you know, stress, gratitude is such a good one. Like, it actually releases happy hormones in your body, in your brain, so we naturally feel good. So I think so science says it's the more specific we can be, the better. So 3 specific good things that have happened within 24 hours.
I remember that. Actually, I saw a TED talk on that. and then talked about by reliving it. So in other
Yeah.
words, the more specific about the reliving, I've forgotten about that. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So it's not just saying I'm grateful for that, but if I go and relive the thing
Mm.
I'm grateful for and bring it back to life. And again, if
Mm-hmm.
I was to write it down, again, I'm firing different parts of the brain, right? So you've
Yeah.
got the visual part, the auditory, and you've got the kinesthetic part by the process. But yeah, that reliving sort of
Mm-hmm.
hardwires it in a different way from just verbalizing. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a beautiful change, right? Because often we ruminate over things that haven't gone well, and we go over and over it, and then we relive the stress and anything traumatic that's happened. We go over and over and over it. Whereas when you're thinking about you're grateful for and something really specific, so 3 good things that have happened in the last 24 hours, we're reliving positive memories, like kind of watering seeds of positive emotion. Oxytocin runs through our brain, our body. So yeah, it's a really, really powerful practice. I was based in a homeless hostel for a whole year. So the Museum of Happiness was in a homeless hostel. So we were working with people who had gone through severe trauma, a lot of drug and alcohol abuse, had spent a lot of time living on the streets, and horrendous things had happened to them. So they're in the homeless hostel now, so their basic needs were met, but they still had so much trauma. And so much inner suffering and turmoil. And I was like, is the gratitude going to work with them, or is it not? Like, is it a bit disrespectful to be like, hey, you know, what are you grateful for? But it worked. It worked. We had a gratitude tree in the Museum of Happiness, and the residents would come in, and you would see that they were struggling. You can see the pain on people's faces, can't you, when people are really struggling. And we'd just sit down, we'd have a cup of tea, and we'd have a chat and say, you know, is there anything that you might feel grateful for, just one thing today, in the last 24 hours. And sometimes they'd be like, no, like things are really crap. And then they'd be like, actually, yeah, you know what, I can find one thing. And then they'd be like, actually, and this thing, or maybe I can find 3. So I think it's really, 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 really powerful.
Interesting. Now let's talk about something else as well. Can we talk about one more practice, and then we'll get back into your story?
Yeah.
Fascinated by your story. What's another practice that people can sort of adopt? And again, remember, you people that already do gratitudes, the reliving of the gratitude, going back and being more specific, so it's going to up level that game. So just again, so even if you say, oh, I already do gratitude. Well, guess what? You know, maybe reliving it. And I remember at many of my events, I'll do a priming exercise. I don't know what priming is. Have you ever seen that? But you actually go back and you're using a breath work, because breath is such a great way to focus internally. And going back and reliving something in the past, but bringing it back to life and spending time in there. And you said it. I mean, it's a visceral experience in the body when you're focused on a beautiful experience in your life. And then what we do is, after we do 3 of those, is start to visualize what you want to create in your life as if it's already happened. So to pushing your mind forward and seeing yourself winning and celebrating is sort of those 2 ends of the coin. Very, 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 very powerful. But what's another thing that you recommend people do?
So this has come from Dr. Kristin Neff's work, and she has basically researched and discovered there is a sentence that you can say to yourself that activates your soothe system in your body. So we've got our threat system that spots all the threats, our drive system that motivates us, and our soothe system that relaxes us and says, hey, we're not actually in a life or death situation here. And it's, I'm doing the best I can right now, and that's all that I can do. So sometimes, you know, when I'm feeling stressed or sad or whatever it is, or, you know, my inner critic, you know, still she's quite quiet now, because my inner coach is very strong, and I can kind of turn her down and be like, thank you, but this is not welcome right now. I'm just like, or if you make a mistake, right? We're human, we make mistakes. To be able to be like, you know what, I'm doing the best I can right now, and that's all that I can do. Has been so helpful in every situation.
Yeah, I love 2 parts of that is you identifying your inner critic. Because again, I call it my imposter.
Yeah.
You know, some people call it the rowdy roommate. And someone listening right now, so I don't have one of those. That little voice that you just heard, that's it, right? What's interesting though, again, when we get back to the psychology of the brain, I mean, why is it and I have my own philosophies on this, and I'm fascinated by yours. But why is it the brain isn't our biggest cheerleader? Why is it the brain? Why is the brain sabotaging success and happiness? Why is it constantly? You think of how incredible this thing is up here, yet the majority of people are living life on some kind of autopilot with a critic in their head that's kicking the crap out of them, unless they be, you know, that conscious awareness, that conscious compassion, that conscious kindness, that consciousness, right? But why is it? Why is the brain not our friend? Why is it doing it to us?
So the brain isn't wired for happiness, it's wired for survival. So that was really handy to our cavemen, cavewomen ancestors, right? We had to spot all the threats. Now in everyday life, this kind of overactive threat spotting system isn't as helpful for us because we're not at risk of being, you know, eaten by a tiger, hopefully. So it's just evolution. I think it's not that our mind is trying to sabotage, although it really feels like it, right? It's the fact that we don't understand the mind, or we haven't made that relationship with our mind. Our mind is just trying its best to keep us alive. And, you know, if we're listening to this right now, it's done a good job. But I think we need to know how to make friends with the mind. We need to understand that the mind's primary purpose is to keep us alive, that we can rewire our brain for happiness. But, you know, it hasn't evolved to that naturally. You know, maybe it will, hopefully it will eventually, and we won't have to do all these practices. We may just naturally be more wired for happiness and gratitude and presence more naturally. But right now, we're not. So we have this negativity bias, we have this threat system. So our mind actually overestimates the threat and underestimates our capability to be able to cope with the perceived threat, because it's better to be safe than sorry. So the mind's ultimately like a don't eat me machine and a meaning making machine. And because we have that negativity bias, a lot of how we're viewing the world is through that more negative lens. So I think knowing that our mind is doing its best just to keep us alive, it's just trying to keep us safe. It does it in a bit of a weird way by kind of reviewing potential threats, trying to foresee potential threats, which again was helpful to our cavemen and cavewomen ancestors. So I think the more we know that thoughts aren't facts, the more we know our mind's just trying to keep us alive and safe, that it will overestimate threats. And I think the way we can talk to ourselves and be like, so I actually talk to my mind. We all do. We think if we talk to ourselves, we're going crazy, but everybody does it, whether we think we do or not.
I do think you're a little crazy, but I like that.
Yeah, we all are, right? And I think it's that thing of like, the way that you can best help yourself is ultimately through our mind. We can either be the attacker and the attacked, or we can be the soother and the soothed. So the things we say to ourselves and the tone of voice that we say it in can activate our threat system in our body, which goes, danger, danger, we're under attack. Or it can activate our soothe system when we say, hey, you know what, I'm doing the best I can right now, that's all I can do. Or do I need to best take care of myself? It will, you know, it will relax your whole nervous system. So I think having that knowledge and understanding of the mind, and knowing that we have that power just by the way we talk to ourselves, that we can really have our own back. And it's that thing, right? When something doesn't go well in life, you know, it's like the Buddha talked about the second arrow. So say if an arrow hit you in the arm, right, it would hurt. But if you then be like, stick the second arrow in yourself, that's the response to the first arrow. So there's a choice, right? So I think in life, if something's not going so well anyway, let's not attack ourselves as well. Let's see if we can think, you know, what would a wise and kind friend say about this situation? And you know, try and be like that with ourselves.
You said something which I loved, which is, and I use this quote, nothing has meaning except the meaning I give it. All right. And we are meaning making up machines.
Yeah.
And the idea that, you know, what meaning am I giving this? So like you said, something occurs. And, you know, in fact, you know, I just did a show this morning on haters. And the theme of that was this, because I was having a conversation last night as I was recording another show with one of my guests, and the word hater came up. And my idea was just simply about, you know, are there such a thing really? Are there really such a thing as a hater? You know, or is it our interpretation? I mean, if someone posts a comment on, and this happened to me on my Instagram account, on my Facebook account, and I read it, and I then put that person in the, oh, they're a hater, versus, hey, either they're projecting something, they're having a bad day. This one woman just put a really, you know, she's like, she used some profanity and whatever. So I actually took a moment and went to her Instagram and had a quick look and saw how unhappy she was.
Yeah.
You know, then I came back and I just wrote her a comment back and realized that, you know, what she was projecting out was really just this immense sense of, I don't know, disconnection. And this was her way of interpreting, and her way of connecting with the world was through this anger, or this, you know, just puking out sort of this kind of stuff. And what I did was I just reached back out, you know, not try to fix her, just to connect. And this happened a few times, happened with a guy as well, where he was just so violently mean on my comment. And I just went back and I said, first of all, I really appreciate it. And then I didn't give up my point of view, but I just gave him the point of view of who I am as a human being. You know, immediately he came back and said, I am so sorry. He said, I can see actually you're a really good person. And I apologized. I said, I understand if you delete me. I said, I have no intention of deleting you. I said, I love the fact that people have contrary opinions to me. And I said, I just want to make sure that when we dialogue, that we dialogue in a healthy way. And I'm always appreciate you being. And it was like this guy who was so angry, and it was so, you know, really, but I get to give it meaning. I get to choose how I respond versus react. And immediately, and now I see him on there, and I feel like he's realized that he could be himself. And he realized that didn't work, and now he can have a different relationship with me. And I kind of hope in some way, and maybe, I mean, he may be listening right now, that he's a little kinder to other people, because, you know, he can see that maybe his words delivered in a haphazard or in a less than thoughtful way could really have an impact. And that if he takes a moment longer just to construct something so that he cares about how it's delivered, right? But again, the reason I'm sharing that story is that, you know, this idea of how much meaning we give things, and if that meaning turns us into someone angry or a victim or whatever those things are, how do we show up next? And typically what I've noticed is people then start to project that hurt out and hurt more people. And it seems to be like this sort of like, what do you call it? Never-ending prophecy. What's the term? Yeah.
I'm thinking more of like, this can either be like a positive ripple effect or a negative ripple effect, or like self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think it reminds me of do you know the tale of the two wolves? So yeah,
I keep putting you on mute because of my son's blower.
That's fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, we all have, you know, this kind of, you know, two parts, the light and the darkness within us. And, you know, we have those seeds of joy and peace and compassion and kindness in us. And we also have hate and fear and greed and jealousy and all of those things. And, you know, some people have had lots of experiences in their life that have watered the bad seeds that we don't want to grow. And I think, you know, they carry around those scars and that pain and project it and spread it. And I think what you did is, you know, it's really wise. Can we meet it with compassion? Okay, what's going on with this person that they are so angry, that they are so, you know, throwing this hate, this negativity around it? And can I meet it with compassion, understanding, non-judgment, and see if it shifts? And you know, it has done when I've also been in those situations, and, you know, breeds more hate. So if we can meet it with love and kindness, or even just not reacting with the same almost like venom that they've come with.
Well, that's why you say, you know, I see that, you know, there's that other, you talk about the two wolves. Do you remember the story of the House of 1,000 Mirrors? Do you know that story?
No.
There's these two dogs, and one's really positive and really happy and light. You know, he hears about this place called, you know, the House of 1,000 Mirrors, and so excited how beautiful it is. And he goes up there and he's excited, his tail's wagging, you know, and he's just like, and he walks up and there's suddenly 1,000 happy dogs looking at him. And it's like, oh my God, this is the best place. And as he gets more and more excited, all the dogs are like looking at him and they're all smiling and they're all wagging their tails and they're all excited. And he's like, oh my God, this is the best place on earth. So he runs back and tells the other dog, and the other dog who's grumpy and miserable and and cynical and whatever, he walks up there and he's like, he slinks in and he looks at it and he looks at it and he sees all these distrusting, cynical, angry dogs, and he's like, this is, and he becomes scared, and the more scared he becomes, the more frightened he becomes, the more everything.
Yeah.
Anyway, he runs back and said, this is the worst place on earth. And that's kind of, I mean, when we get back down to how we show up, and I always feel like the world is, what's that great saying? I have so many of these things that run through my head. We don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are, and it treats us accordingly. So going back to your happiness museum, what is your what is the goal here? I mean, what would you like, even as we don't have too much longer in the show today, but hopefully you'll come back because I could talk to you for hours. What is what would be the goal? What is the thing? What is the hope, the wish? What is the drive? What is the purpose that you have that you want people to grasp today?
So it's kind of realizing, I think, that happiness is a skill that can be learned, and we can use and learn these tools to alleviate suffering. So one of my core missions is to get this in the education system. So we're working in a lot of schools at the moment, teaching teachers, teaching the students. The students are creating mini museum of happinesses in their school, which is super cool. So that's one of the aims. So rolling this out as many schools as possible, like across the world. And, hopefully getting this actually in the education system, in the curriculum. It's so needed. We're in such a mental health crisis, and actually it doesn't have to be this way if there was more preventative measures in place. All the useless information we learn at school, right? And it's like, we need to know how our mind works and our, difficult emotions, how to take care of ourselves. It's really important. And the other thing is we really want to have a permanent centre again. So we've had a permanent centre for a year, and we trialed it, and the overheads are just so high in London, right? And our target market and our audience, our community, we don't want to charge them loads of money to come to the Museum of Happiness. So the aim is to have a Museum of Happiness space in every city around the world that wants one, which is this hub for community and learning. So yeah, education systems, schools, and also having these permanent spaces is our kind of core mission that I'm going to dedicate my life to.
So if somebody wants to help out, let's say they've got the money, or they got a building, or they have access to a situation where they could. Can they reach out to you and find you?
Absolutely.
And say, let's partner with you. Can you just tell them how the best way to get hold of you is?
Yeah, absolutely. So our new website was launched today. So grateful. Yeah.
It launched today?
Grateful. Like literally an hour before this, maybe half an hour. Yeah.
By the way, isn't it great that you and I didn't really talk at all? How long were we talking before I pushed record? Was it like a minute?
Like 1 minute.
Yeah, right.
It's like we've been friends for life.
I know, it's so great. It's so cool. And the fact is that you've now launched this website, which is really, and hopefully, if you're watching, think about that, and maybe, especially in the community that I run in, maybe there's a few of you that could get together to say, look, why don't we fund one of these projects? Why don't we help out? Why don't we, so there's lots of ways to do that. So tell them, where's your website? What is it?
Absolutely. So it's www.museumofhappiness.org, and all the information about our schools programs and gorgeous real life photos are on there. And the website was gifted to us in kind, and I'm just so grateful. Like the kindness, the Museum of Happiness is so ran on kindness. Like we're predominantly volunteer-led organization of just dedicated, heart kind of driven love pioneers that just dedicating their life to spread happiness, just out in their time. Well, some people are full-time mums. We have some of our core volunteers are, one lady is caring for her terminally ill husband, one lady has got chronic illness herself, another one is a mum of two small children, and just people have just dedicated their life to helping and supporting this mission, and I'm just so immensely grateful.
That's so cool. And that sort of going back to through your story, I just don't want to sort of end on let's go raise some money, but we'll look at that and help you with that. But What is, when you go back and you think about the moments of transformation for you, you talked about the Dalai Lama, you talked about the school in Cambodia. Can you think of other situations that you went through that allowed you to sort of wake up and sort of start to notice your own inner dialogue wasn't, you know, really serving you or the world in any way?
Yep, absolutely. I remember it well. I got completely and utterly burnt out. Like, you know, I was supporting all these young people that were suicidal, and I just became a bit of a nervous wreck. Like, you know, trying to get through the weekend, not knowing if everyone was going to make it through the weekend does not do good things for your mental, emotional health, believe me. So I had to really seek help. I had to get a life coach. I got therapy myself. And then there's been another couple of really important moments in my life where, you know, working with all the homeless people again, that level of kind of holding that heaviness and the darkness almost of what was around me. I also tipped to getting on the burnout side and had to take time out and go to Auroville in India. I went and lived in a nunnery, Jetsuma Palmo's
nunnery.
A nunnery. I sounded so northern.
Is that what they call them when there's lots of nuns live together? A nunnery.
A nunnery.
You sound like a northerner there.
I am northern.
Where are you from?
It's called Polterly Filed. It's in Lancashire.
Lancashire. All right. Now wait, I can hear your accent now.
So you can only really tell that I'm northern from, like, if I say cup or hug or mug or nun, it's the
nunnery.
The nunnery. So yeah, you know what, I got pretty burnt out again, just through, you know, wanting to, you know, when you're running a startup and you're so passionate about kind of helping change the world, you have to be whatever energy you have to put you're putting out, you have to put double back in, right? Otherwise you just become unbalanced. Double. And I got really burnt out, and I questioned, you know, can I do this? You know, am I the right person? Inner critic had a field day and was like, are you the right person to run and lead this organization? You know, this is the second time you've become burnt out in a few years. And I took some time out and I did Vipassana in the Himalayas. So kind of 10-day silent retreat.
10 days, yeah.
And I lived in the nunnery, and I just had to ask myself some deep questions, you know, is this what my path is? How can I best take care of myself? Because I'm getting a bit burnt out. And, you know, when you're a meditation self-care teacher, you know, it's not a good look, right? You can't, and it's so important to live and embody what you're teaching. And I was like, okay, I need to do something differently. So I took some time out, just focused on my inner work and inner world. And it was this sense of, actually, the best thing I can do for world peace is to cultivate peace in myself. And I now have really strong self-care practice. I do something, so Gandhi did something called Silent Mondays. So every Monday is just dedicated, like totally digital detox, meditation, just that me time. But I actually, I got a little bit burnt out, went and lived in the nunnery, as you do, headed to the Himalayas, did some volunteering.
I love that, as you do.
As you do. Question, do I want to become a nun? And then I was like, no, it's not your path. But it was this sense of, how do I walk this middle path, you know? Like, it's balancing pleasure, peace, and purpose. And to me, that's what real, authentic, sustainable happiness is. It's that balance of pleasure and purpose. And I came back, and we really, you know, I was quite close to throwing in the towel. You know, I was like, maybe, you know, I need to do something that's less demanding of my energy. And I took some time out, and I actually ended up going to San Francisco. We won an award with Facebook as one of the top 100 community organizations in the world, and so grateful. And it took me to San Francisco, and I met a wonderful lady, dear friend, Henka, and I stayed at her house. And she I spoke to her. She was one of those gorgeous humans where you just instantly connect and open your heart up, and, you know, we're best friends now. And I just said, you know what, I'm just in a bit of a crossroads in my life. I want to dedicate my life to the Museum of Happiness, and also my energy isn't regenerating like what it used to. And she actually introduced me to an amazing kind of art of wellness program, and I asked her to be my mentor. And, through that love, support, empowerment, the kind of nutritional system and help and support as well, I stepped up in the organization. I'm the main director now. And, I had to almost, I have a tattoo actually, or a lotus, which I got in California. And it's that lotuses from the mud, right? Lotuses only grow in deep, dark, yucky mud. Some good us in there then. I was in the mud, I was in the point of the mud where I was like, oh my God, I'm like up to my eyeballs in the mud.
Right.
And actually it took taking that time out to be like, okay, you need to make some changes in your life. And the people came. They say, when the student's ready, the teachers appear. And, these real life angels like Andrea, appeared in my life. And it was a real true gift. And there's been many lotuses from that burnout, actually, of like, I live my life very differently now, and I've had to learn to say no, which, I want to do everything. I want to teach every school.
we could do a whole show on that, the learning how to
Let's
say
do
no.
it.
Yeah,
I'm
just
in.
on that. Yeah, okay,
Count me
right.
in.
All right, we'll do another one. Sure. Yeah, what a great story. I'm fascinated, and thank Andrea was the reason why you're on the show as well. So we can thank you for that. But talk a little bit just about those 10 days of silence. For a lot of people, being silent for 10 minutes is almost impossible. But the idea of actually being in silence for 10 whole days, and just give us a sense of the struggle and the realization. What was the kind of, because there's going to be, I'm guessing there has to be that.
Oh yeah.
Of you're like, oh my God, I just want to yell from the treetops.
Run for the hills. Why have I done this?
Run.
Oh my goodness. So it was actually the being in the burnout, being in the mud, where I was like, you've got some inner stuff going on here that it's going to take more than a holiday or, a day off. You need to really look at what's going on. Because I think when our energy isn't regenerating anymore, there's usually something going on. And I really believe that we have so much wisdom inside of ourselves. We just need to carve out time to kind of tune in. So I headed to the Himalayas on Vipassana, and, I got in there and I instantly, they shut the gates, and there was so many monkeys everywhere that there's barbed wire and bars everywhere to keep the monkeys from causing havoc.
And you think you're thinking you're being caged in.
Yeah, I am like, oh good God, this is like jail. Like this is really scary. And you get a meditation cell. It's actually, which is just a concrete room, concrete bed.
Yeah.
Which, the whole Vipassana experience was very different than the other retreats I've been on, which are, usually mindful self-compassion retreats, which are lovely. They leave little heart chocolates on your bed and little notes. And this was like, a stone bed with no pillow. And I was like, God, this is like, I've gone to jail because I've done something really bad. And the first day, my mind was like, why have you done this? This is a terrible idea. It was just going over and over and over. And then I had to remind myself, no, you have been really lucky to get on this. You have paid and opted in to do this for yourself. No one is forcing you to be here. And you can leave. If you want to leave, you can leave. You have to convince them to let you leave, but you can leave. And the second day, I felt like I had the flu.
Bribing the guards with cigarettes to get out through the gate. Tunneling.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry, tunneling.
Yeah. And the second day I felt like I had the flu. It was like, they talk about it being a purification of your mind and your body. Yeah. And it was like, God, like having to sit up straight for 10 hours a day, right? With no cushion, no back support. And I just started to feel like I had the flu. Everything in my body ached. And then I wondered, you know, if I was dying. So basically, bit of a funny story. I always play with the street dogs and the puppies, and I know you shouldn't because they're wild animals and it's not the same as a puppy here, but I can't resist. And I got bitten by a dog before going to Vipassana, and so I had to get the rabies injections. And I was like in there being like, God, what if you've got rabies? This is going to be a really awful death.
She's doing Vipassana and there's white foam coming down the side of her mouth.
just really quickly, I know I've deviated a little bit.
No, it's perfect. Perfect.
Just a little real story of kindness. I got bitten by the dog, and a homeless lady on the street saw it happen. And she said, you must come with me and go to the hospital. And I was like, no, I'm going to go back to my hotel and I'll figure out what to do from there. And she was like, no, you need to go now. And she took me by my good hand and she took me to the hospital, and I had to have 6 really big injections. And she sat and cradled me like I was her own daughter. And she was like, it's okay. And I was like, the kindness of that random stranger that had seen that happen. And, you know, if she hadn't done that, I would have gone back to my hotel and probably fallen asleep. And basically with rabies, if you get bitten, you have to have the injection within a certain amount of hours of getting bitten.
It's already, it's embedded.
It was game over. Over.
Your silent practice would have been a lot longer.
yeah, exactly. So, you know, she saved my life, you know. But in my moments of Vipassana, feeling like I had flu, I was like, oh my goodness, the mind spirals into, you know, you've got rabies, And I was like, you need to have trust and faith that you're not dying of rabies right now. And this is the purification process that they tell you about. Day 3, something lifted in me. You know, the mind goes over and over something, ruminates, forward plans, worries. And then eventually it's like, God, this is boring. And it starts to settle. And there was just a bit of a peace that started to come. And then I was like, this is maybe what a snippet of inner peace feels like. And then there's a clinging. The mind wants to hold on to it, of like, savor this, hold on to this.
I found peace. I'm holding on to it. I'm going to suffocate it.
Hold on to peace. And then, you know, then you don't feel peaceful anymore because you're clinging and you're grasping. And then on day 4, this is a funny story. So basically, my worst fear came true. And thankfully, because I'd done 40 hours of meditation, it was actually fine. So I was in my little cell, and there's no light in there or in the Himalayas or in the retreat center. It was pitch black. And I woke up in the middle of the night because I could hear something in my room. And I was like, please let it be a monkey. Please just let it be a monkey. And I was like, that is not a monkey. It is scuttling around. It sounds like a really big rat. And obviously you haven't got a torch.
But by the way, you're doing a good job for meditation tourism right now. Rabies, barbed wire, and now rats. I think you guys are going to be signing up. There's going to be this better be a happy ending. No, I'm just kidding.
It's a happy ending. Yeah, I know. I promise.
So there's something scurrying.
There was something scurrying and scuttling around. And I was like, oh dear God, there's something in the room. And I was like, well, you've got a choice. You can sit up all night afraid, and then you won't be able to do any meditation tomorrow because you'll just fall asleep and you'll be snoring and you'll dribble and it'll be embarrassing. So I was like, you know, you're just going to have to go back to sleep. And then I woke up to something climbing on me up my leg. And it was a really giant rat. And I didn't scream. I was just so logical. And I was like, okay, there's a giant rat on me. I'm going to open the door. And because I didn't scream.
I love it.
It just kind of, it got off the bed, and I opened the door and a tiny bit of light popped in, and we just looked at each other. And there was this, and I saw this, you know, this really cute animal. And we looked at one another in the eye. I know I sound a bit crazy. I realized, I was like, why are you telling the story? You sound crazy. And we're going to go with it. And I just thought, do you know what? This is just another being just like me. And actually, it's probably come in here because it's cold and windy outside right now. And I wasn't afraid. And if someone had said to me 4 days before, you're going to wake up because there's going to be a giant rat in your bed, I would have thought I would have screamed the whole place down. And actually, I think because I'd done kind of 40 hours of meditation at that point, I think my soothe system was so relaxed that I couldn't freak out. And I think I'd cultivated a lot of peace inside of me, and also compassion, that instead of this overriding fear or fight or flight even kick in, there was a peace and a stillness. And that Vipassana process just got stronger and stronger and stronger.
But
My worries.
before we move on to day 5 and through the end,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to talk about this because, you know, when I think about, and you can go on YouTube today and you see these guys that live and work with lion prides, or Jane Goodall, you know, who, in fact, there were three women. There was Fossey, there was Goodall. I can't remember the other one. One studied chimpanzees, one studied orangutans, one studied the gorillas. They went and lived with them. And there's that connection, because you think about
Vipassana?
Those things.
We know what you mean.
Vipassana. But, you know, when you think about, you know, sitting in with the wild animals and building rapport, and you get this sense of these hours and days and weeks and months, and then this connection. And so when you were talking about the rat, I know you said it sounded crazy. For me, what it opened in my mind was how, when you see a real connection between, like, some people, they call them, you know, dog whisperers, like Cesar Millan, or, you know, horse whisperers, people who can walk up to a wild animal and the animal immediately soothes. So this is the connection you're talking about to yourself. And we talk about projection. You're projecting out this fearlessness and this connectivity, where the rat is calm. And that's what Cesar Millan, who's the great dog trainer, and I've seen him live, you know, someone bring a dog on stage and that's completely out of control. And in about 2 minutes, the animal is completely calm and walking by his side, because of this project. So I actually think this pulls us full circle, the rat story, just so that you don't go off there. Why did I tell the crazy rat story? I feel that it really is about who you are in that moment, being so connected, and the gentleness with which you approach the rat. So the rat's kind of like almost, thanks, see you later, you know, pops out the door without, I mean, you didn't say I chased it around the bedroom with a pillow and tried to get it out the door. I said I opened the door and the rat kind of,
I didn't want to leave. It just kind of looked at me and I was like, dude, you can't live in here. I would love to do the whole Cinderella thing and have you as a pet, but it's not going to fly.
Well, as long as if you turn into a stagecoach and a couple of horses, we can do it, right? Anyway, so sorry, I interrupted your story.
No, it was, thank you for bringing meaning to it. I think that's a really beautiful thing, that exactly that happened. And, you know, did I ever think that would ever happen with a rat? No, absolutely not. And I think rats get such a bad rep as well, don't they? You know, and so it was ultimately one of my worst fears that came true. And it was really interesting because there was so many monkeys on site. You could see it with the monkeys really obviously. So the monkeys were so cheeky. They really live up to their name and reputation of being cheeky monkeys. So if you're a little bit jumpy or frightened of them, they will jump out at you. They will hide behind a tree and jump out at you and hiss at you and growl and show their teeth. And so fear meets more fear, and then more fear, and then fights break out, or they have to run away. Somebody runs away. Whereas if you are really quiet and still and peaceful, the monkeys are so chilled around you. They'll just come and they'll be with you and they'll come close to you. They'll touch your clothes. But as soon as you flinch, you know, they flinch and run away. So it's, I guess it's like what we were saying before, with whether it's humans, mammals, any animals, if we can meet with love and peace and kindness, any being feels it, don't they? And the same with fear and anger.
Well, I think love is that, and I know it sounds corny for some people listening, but, you know, people like us who practice and see the results of the practice. I mean, it's not just, you know, I think we could talk for days on situations where somebody walking into that situation is going to have a completely different response than, like, for example, I even think of Vanuatu, with the kindest people on earth and happiest people on earth. If somebody was distrusting and drove through that country, they're going to leave saying everyone's miserable, right? Because they just, you know, the way that they approach people is going to be the way that they reflect back. So this has been beautiful. I know that I feel like we're just sort of starting the conversation. So we will get together again. And I just thought, is there any last thoughts that you want to leave with our audience as far as just, again, I always go back to the person who's struggling right now, who's really, like you talked about, you know, when you've been in situations and you meet somebody and they are in that, where the negative voice is so loud, they're almost not hearing the positive. Is there any last thoughts or any last words you want to leave with them?
I would say try your best to just be a little bit gentle with yourself. I've been there where the negative voice is so loud and you're like, how can I even live with myself? And that kind of, you know, it's tough, you know. And I think if you can, remembering the lotuses from the mud, I think if we're in a really dark,
Show the tattoo, remember the
yeah,
lotus.
remember the lotus from the mud. And I think just trusting the process, you know, like there's been times where I've been literally drowning in the mud and I've been like, God, this is so like, this is crap, you know. The struggle, the darkness, and I think we all go through it. And I think, you know, just trusting the process, that some meaning, some wisdom, some learning, some teaching, some beauty will come from that mud. And I'm a firm believer that the mud that life throws at us, we can use it as fertilizer to grow. I really believe we can. And when you're in it, you can't see that, right? You're just like, God, this is shit, you know? But I think, yeah, holding on to trust and faith and hope, and just seeing if you can just be mindful of not putting that second arrow in, you know, and just treating yourself as you would a good friend. Yeah.
So as you were saying that, a bald eagle flew right by the window here. I'm going to show you real quick. I don't normally do this, but look out the window. Look. Can you see?
I can't see the eagle.
Oh no, you wouldn't see the eagle. I was just going to show you. There's this beautiful vista. So you're talking about love, kindness, and hope. And right by this window here, did you see could you see the lake?
I saw.
So this beautiful eagle just flew right by it. It was like the end of the movie came, da-da, you know, it's crescendo, right? So yeah, you know, just thank you so much for today. And I want to just talk to, you know, those of you listening. You know, it's called My Extra Mile. And it's really about those little tiny steps. It's those incremental changes done consistently over time that I know create the results. So it's that question of today, that message of self-kindness, self-awareness, self-compassion, you know, understanding that, you know, those little tiny steps, whether it's the gratitude or asking that question, you know, really utilizing even just those two practices of how that can allow us to take that one tiny step closer to the things we want. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, Victoria. And we'll definitely see you on the other side.